Hey everybody, welcome to the Ed Collab Gathering. This is session 2, workshop number 6, starting the Year Off Right, building a community of readers and writers. I'm here with 2 awesome educator collaborative folks who just know so much about literacy. These are the people you go to when you want to know what to read. JoEllen McCarthy and Chad Everett. So Chad, I'm going to turn it over to you. And don't forget to tweet along with us using the hashtag #TheEdCollabGathering space #6. Over to you, Chad.
All right. Thanks, Lauren. And so once again, welcome to session 6 of the Ed Collab Gathering. We're so excited to have you with us today. There's been so much awesome learning already shared today. I'm fired up. I have an entire page of notes beside me, and I can't wait to go back and watch the archive. Like Lauren said, I'm Chad Everett. I'm an 8th grade English teacher. I've worked in classrooms K-12. I've also worked in curriculum at my district's central office. So I'm excited to share some things that I've been doing this year and in past years with you. And JoEllen, you want to say a few things about yourself?
Sure. I am very lucky to be a colleague of Chad's and working with the Educator Collaborative, and I am a literacy coach consultant on Long Island and also do workshops regionally and nationally. So I have the best job in the whole world because I get to learn and work with students and teachers every day.
Awesome. So one quick thing. Don't forget, if you want to tweet along with us today, use hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering and then space and then hashtag sign again and the number 6, and that makes it where we can track your thoughts or things that you want to share with us or questions that you might have throughout the session. All right.
Absolutely.
So, you can't have, and so today we're going to be talking about building a community of readers and writers, and I think the most important part of that title is building community, and you can't have community without trust. You can't have trust without respect. I think longtime educator Rita Pearson would put it this way, like every child needs a champion. They need to feel like someone's in their corner that has their back, that's supporting them. So every year I start the year the same way, and I believe that these are the most powerful words, the most powerful 5 words that I'll say all year long, and that's I'll never quit on you. And I say, and I also end the year with those, and I say begin and end the year because I think it's easy to say I'll never quit on you in August and September. And we just met and we're all excited about learning and everyone's fired up. But I think as we move into March, April, and May, and we've sort of gotten tired and our students have sort of gotten tired, and maybe their behaviors aren't living up to our expectations, or academically, maybe they're struggling a little bit and we're trying to figure out how we can come alongside them and support them. Those are the moments when they really need to hear those words the most, that I'll never quit on you. It's in those moments where things are hard that we need to hear those, not just in moments of good. And as an educator, it's one of those moments where I really have to push myself to remember I need to be there for my kids, and they need to hear me say that, and not just say that, but they also need to hear me show that. So what are some questions that we could ask ourselves? And I ask myself, what are some questions that I could ask myself to push my practice, to think about the actions that I need to take to build a community of readers and writers?
So I love that I get to share the opportunity to discuss this with Chad because he's such a caring educator. And one of the things that he and I have been talking about a lot is, in referencing the fact that no one cares what you know until they know that you care. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and looking at the concept that we kind of coined the common care standards, because it's essential to be thinking about that. And when we talk about what are our standards and our expectations for kids, it starts with questioning who we have in front of us and getting to learn who our students are, what they hope, what their hopes are, what their dreams are. And as Chad just said, asking those questions and getting student voice to be at the heart of this conversation, because we can only work alongside kids by learning with them and from them. And it starts with building community. There is nothing more important than taking the time to get to know the kids in front of us. And Chad and I both were saying how this is such an important conversation to have, because people are always in a rush this time of year and you want to get to go and, start doing this and doing that. And essentially what we have to do is slow down, take the time to build relationships, to focus on establishing trust and caring environments where kids feel safe and comfortable and want to learn and want to share, and not only want to learn and share and grow, but they want to share their stories. And that's so essential for the work that we're doing.
Absolutely. And so one of the ways that I start the year is with this anchor chart that's on the right, that school should be. and my students look at me a little strange the first time that I look at it. I'm like, so what should our school be? What should our classroom look like? And what types of students and what type of teacher do I need to be for you? So of course I took out the tools of the trade. We're nothing without our markers, our anchor chart paper, and our sticky notes, right? And one of the things that I do is I realized that I was going through so many sticky notes that I went to my office supply store. I bought a big pack of the Astrobites paper and just had it cut into quarters and repositionable glue sticks, and it changed my life in my classroom. So I pulled it out, and then I love just not leading conversations with my students, but becoming a member of the conversation with my students. So the question was simply, what should school be? Broadly, what should school be? And my students came back, it should be a place where everyone feels valued and safe. And it should be a place, and there were things like, I should be able to eat what I want to in the cafeteria. And also I should be able to listen to my music in my headphones, but also this idea that we needed to care for one another. And so we started broadly with the question of what should school be? And then we moved toward, all right, so based on what you said about what school should be, now, what do we need to do in our classroom to help create that type of school? And then we continued to move into the micro, and then it became, what do I need to do as your teacher to help create that type of classroom that helps create that type of school that ultimately creates the type of world that we want? And then what do you need to do as a student to help create that type of classroom that creates the type of school that we want to see? And it became this really powerful moment where my students, and then I was responsive to that, right? Like I changed my classroom schedule and I changed the way that I was teaching. My students loved it because they knew then, like, our voice matters in this classroom.
I love hearing Chad and seeing how passionate he is about his work with the students. That's one thing I'm a little jealous about, because as a coach in many classrooms, so I don't have my own children full time, but I'm very fortunate to have many children, kind of like a literacy grandma, and visiting classrooms. And so again, part of the work that I've been doing and that Chad and I both are talking about is starting off the year right with some of those questions. So we had questions, but we also have powerful read alouds. I think it's essential that we talk about books that will touch students, their minds, their hearts, and their hands. And so when we can read a story or read a book or share a book that helps kids to see maybe even something that has to do with learning styles or learning environment. Like I just was sharing with Chad a book that's fairly new, is a book called Charlotte and the Quiet Place. And it's about a young girl and her learning style and how she's always searching for quiet and how she feels she can thrive. And that's what matters for her. And so when we have books that then can really help lend ourselves the opportunity for the conversations to say, can we see ourselves in these books? How are we like that character or not like that character? What's a learning style or learning environment that fits me? And then as our job, we can then try to be flexible in arranging spaces and places for kids to feel that they can thrive. And not just books about learning styles, but books about life. We're going to talk a lot today about literacy and life lessons, because that's what this is all about. That's how we build community.
Absolutely. And JoEllen, I remember we were planning, you talked about like just essential questions we ask ourselves. So not just what should school look like, but I love the question that you added was, what are you passionate about? And providing space for our students to not only make us aware of what they're passionate about, but then time and just time for them to pursue those passions as well, right? Like that informs my instruction. It's not just, it didn't just raise my awareness, but it caused me to make a change in my practice as a result of what students told me. And I love that when we were planning, when you shared that.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me that. I think, it's really important, as you said, passionate learners, our colleague Praneel Rip has a fabulous book on that topic. But when we can marry passion with process for our kids, it's a home run. And even Catherine Bomer this morning talking about that, the essential, what makes an essay, and what makes an essay is voice. And when kids care about what they're writing about, writing from the heart. And so if we know what they're passionate about and we can help marry passion and process in everything that we do, it's a win-win situation. So again, it's essential to take that time to hear from the voice of our students and to help create opportunities like Genius Hour, or even just if they were focusing on, writing an essay, writing about changing the world, what they care about, what they want to make a difference, what they want to do. And when their hearts are tied into that, it just becomes, powerful work in every level.
Absolutely. So then I think the next logical question is, all right, so how do we keep students at the center of what we do? Like, we know we have mandates on testing, like our principal's looking at our scores, and we've got PLC meetings, and we have tons of things going on in that busy work, but how do we keep students at the center of what we do? So JoEllen, because I love so much that image that you put on the right of a curriculum of children. Could you just talk to not just those listening, but also me about what it means to have that curriculum of children?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because if you notice that I'm obsessed with Mud Love. So you show that image. It happens to be a bracelet that I had that logo added to, and I'm obsessed with this Mud Love. So a little Mud Love shout out, because just to be able to think about when you have a word or a thought or an idea, and you can wear that on your sleeve, literally and figuratively, to make a difference. That's your focus. And when you think about curriculum, to me, the curriculum are the kids in front of us, and so that's what we have to focus on. We have to think about how we can adapt all that we're doing to be essential around the kids in front of us. The children are our curriculum, and we have to focus on who they are and what they need, and then to adapt all of our instruction around that. And so it doesn't matter what standard or what an I mean, not that it doesn't matter, but you know what I mean, that it's the kids in front of us. And as you said, we have to know about what's going on in the world around us too, and bringing in current events, which I know we're going to talk about in a moment. We can't ignore what's happening around us in this world.
Absolutely. That's huge. And I see the conversations happening on Twitter around teachers wrestling through, like, how do I do that? Can I talk about this? My principal told me not to, but I feel like it's so important that I can't not talk about it. So if we're going to have a curriculum of children, then we've got to think of the needs of all of our children, right? And like you sort of hinted at, that's everything from the windows, mirrors, and doors that we have on our bookshelves to also thinking about what's happening out in the world. So one of the ways that were you about to say something, JoEllen?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I think it's, it's also so essential, like we've been talking about empathy. And, I love the quote that, unfortunately, Anna Dudney, who just passed away, who was an author of the Llama Llama picture book series for young kids. She said, empathy is as important as literacy. And I think that that's also a layer of a curriculum of children, that we're teaching our kids to be caring human beings. And that's part of the essential elements of a curriculum of children, empathy.
Right. And so because we know that story is at the heart of all that we do, and if children are going to be at the center of all that we do, then we need to put children's stories at the center of all that we do. So that's why I begin the year with narrative. And I know in so many classrooms across the United States, like we pull out Georgia Lines, where I'm from, and I love that poem, and I love teaching the craft moves of that poem. But I just want to take a minute to be like, let's please, let's not reduce that poem to a fill in the blank template. That there's so much more going on there, and often it's easier to go to that fill in the blank template, but we miss the power of that, not only that poem, but poetry when we reduce it to that. And also begin to use that poem, so we're going to give students an opportunity to talk about the people and places and where they're from. And I think about Chimamanda Adichie's The Danger of a Single Story video that we often show to students in our classrooms. But then, so once I've shown that video and talked about the danger of a single story, then I begin to see that where I'm from narrative as an opportunity for students to defy single stories, right? To begin to tell their own stories about the places and the people that they come from, and an opportunity for us to learn from one another in the classroom where we can begin to defy stereotypes.
Absolutely. We forgot to tell everybody that Chad and I worked on a document that we're going to tweet out, a Padlet with many of the resources that we've already talked about, some of the TED Talks, like the Rita Pierson TED Talk that Chad just mentioned, and also books and titles, and we will definitely share that with you. And we hope that the conversation becomes a collaborative one and that you can add to that. So there'll be a Padlet as well. And we want to hear from you. So when we talk about those essential questions and getting to know your students, what are some of the questions that you ask of your children, coming in? We have that slide that, what are you passionate about, but also thinking about things like, what do you need from me this year as your teacher? That's a question that I often ask. And I ask that of the coaches that I work with as well, as the students, because, we are all learners and we're learning from each other and with each other every day. And we have to view every opportunity as an opportunity for learning. So what are some of those questions that maybe you could share with us, things that you're focusing on and asking to get to know and to build community in your rooms?
Absolutely. So tweet those out, because we'd love to pull those in and address those questions. And JoEllen, I love that you said that, because it reminded me of some of those moments, like when I'm conferring with students about their reading and we're setting goals, and I look at them and I'm like, all right, what can I do for you as your teacher to help support you? And the first time they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, so sometimes it's as simple as, can I just check in with you more often and talk about my reading and give you an opportunity to talk about your reading, just constantly being responsive to our students and their needs. So to go back though, to one of the larger points that we're also making is, so what do we do when the world hands you a curriculum? And I think about a blog post that I wrote last night, right? And with everything that's going on in the world and in our classrooms, not pretending that the world out there outside those four walls doesn't exist, because every day it walks through the front doors with backpacks on and lunchboxes in hand, and they're expecting us to talk about it, right? We're preparing them not just to be adults, right? But we're preparing them for today, for when they walk out of the school today, and how are they going to deal with what they're seeing on the news and what they're hearing their parents talk about, and then what they're experiencing. And one of the things that's on the Padlet is Penn State's Howard Stevenson, one of the resources he has for how to talk to students after racial incidents, because I know that sometimes we sort of shy away from it because we're not fully confident in our skill set and we get nervous. So one of the places I think to begin is as an educator. We can't guide students where we haven't walked ourselves. So to think about how are we growing as professionals, I think about our Voxer group that we have where we talk about current events and talk about our practice and just wrestling through issues ourselves and providing the space. We talked about that for students to do those same things. One other thing from ILA this summer, Sarah Ahmed and Cornelia Sminer had that talk about what to do when the world hands your curriculum. So that video there's a video of a talk that they gave before their session at ILA. It's on the Padlet resource page. Check it out, check it out, check it out.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, and we also added in from a blog post that Cornelius wrote as a follow-up to that chat and conversation. So lots of good stuff, because today is, such a great day, as Chris, says, PD in your PJs, and, you want to find yourself so wrapped up in this, but when it's over, it's not over, because this conversation needs to continue. And so, by providing those resources and really growing those resources together, we have the opportunity to then, be there for one another and to offer ideas and share, and then be able to continue these conversations with our kids.
Absolutely.
Sorry, my headphones fell out. And while you're getting up the next slide, I just, thinking about resources and books too. I know that a book that's brand new is called The Highest Mountain of Books in the World, and it's about a young boy who wishes he could fly. And the message is in there that with books can take you places and can take you to imaginary places and real places. And I think obviously we're preaching to the choir here and talking to all of you listening from home, the power of a picture book. I think it's so essential that we take the time to use powerful picture books as mentor texts, and then to really focus on the authors who are writing those words, so that we can then let our kids see that there are stories behind those stories. So one of the books that I also absolutely love, and I'm such a geek, I'm going to show you this because I get really excited. I went to the Brooklyn Book Festival last weekend, and I actually got this signed by the illustrator Mike Curato, and he did a beautiful, beautiful little autograph in there about being true to yourself and knowing that love is love. And books like Worm Loves Worm, which just talks about the beauty and power of love in general, and not putting labels or creating the opportunity for kids to understand that love is love. And as you said earlier, and we've been saying again and again, the words of looking at books as windows and mirrors and doors. And so having the opportunity to share powerful picture books in a short amount of time and then continue conversations with our kids is really building community essentials.
Absolutely. It reminds me of, and I promise I'm going to the next slide, but like one of my kids who looks at me like, because JoEllen is my picture book person. If you haven't figured that out, like the JoEllen and Pernille, and that's why I'm so blessed and so fortunate to work with them, because I had a kid that looked at me and she was like, Mr. Everett, you got a picture book for everything. And I'm like, no, I don't, but I have a person that has a picture book for everything. So also as educators, like remember that as we talk about building a community of readers and writers, it's not just for our students, it's building communities of readers and writers like for us as well, that we step into community, not just with our students, but with our colleagues. And that being said,
that's so true, because that's how we learn, that's how we share. I don't have a picture book for everything, but I do have friends, and I have a powerful professional learning network. And when we share and we say, hey, what's out there, can you think of something, or I really need to help reach a student who's dealing with this right now. And when kids are given the opportunity to have conversations around books, that's really helpful for that window too. And sometimes I don't have, I'll reach out to somebody, a nerdy book club friend, or I'll talk to other people who are passionate about using picture books like Pernille, and just say, like what's out there. And not only that, it doesn't have to be a new book, because I find myself saying that all the time, like, oh, this is new, but even the books that are old, that maybe are old to us, are new to our kids and are really essential as well.
Absolutely. So JoEllen, all of these things we've talked about, I think, tie directly into the conversations that I've heard you lead so many times about the common care standards. So please, for those that aren't familiar, could you just tell us about the common care standards?
Sure, sure. So basically just, inspired by the work that we're doing together, and really what started this conversation was last year at NCTE, I had the privilege of presenting with Trudy Ludwig, who is a powerful picture book author that writes all about character ed and empathy. All of her picture books, if you don't know Trudy Ludwig, she's fabulous. And Marissa Moss, who I also adore, who's best known for Amelia's Notebooks, but has a variety of powerful biographies that are based on, people whose stories really haven't been told. Talk about defying a single story. She tends to write a lot about women in history that we don't know a lot about. And the third person involved in that conversation was Catherine Itoshi, who wrote One and Zero, and a book I actually have back there, Beautiful Hands, which is gorgeous. And we were talking about how all we hear about is the common, the common core. And Marissa said, it's really more about common care. And this conversation just kind of evolved about how making care being at the heart of all of this. And so some of the things that, are what we've been talking about from, the start of our work together, looking at character and looking at, agency for kids, thinking about the intentional use of language and respect and empathy, and also focusing on, having kids be responsible for their own learning, and learning as life work. I can't say that enough. It's not about the school work, it's about the life work that we're doing. So, I'm doing a lot of thinking and writing on this idea as well. And it's influenced by, the work of the teachers and the students that I get to be with. But I think that, when we hear people talk about the standards, I think the most important thing is, are we looking at the common care standards and how that can influence the life work of our kids?
Absolutely. Like it as I'm sitting here looking at the slides and just reflecting on which of these standards have I not addressed, which of these standards have I addressed, and then asking myself the question, so what do I need to do to address each of those standards, right? Like, because I'll say it again, like we're not just preparing students to be adults, we're preparing them for today. So these are skills and things that they need right now that we can support them, like character and agency, right? Telling my students that, no, you don't have to wait until you're 35 to do something that impacts the world, right? Do you have thoughts? Do you have things that you want to do now? Well, what can I do as your teacher to provide the space and opportunity for you to be able to do that?
I love that you said that, because you keep bringing back, this cycle, that it's not just the students, it's not just the teachers, it's the collaboration between the two, and that we have to support one another. And, and always going back to that question, how can we help one another? And, we were talking about looking at some of the work that Chris has started too with our conversations around that strong classroom self-assessment. So I can tweet that out. If you haven't seen that, it's all over at the website, but there's like an assessment tool that you can take, which really covers a variety of areas and kind of hints to these common care standards as well.
All right. So now, JoEllen, we talked about it. So how can we discover goals, resolutions? Like now, what are other ways that I can get to know my students?
Yeah. When Chad and I were talking, we actually were talking about spaces and places, which, that term comes actually from a professional book by Debbie Diller years ago, where before there were, transparency of classrooms and environments being shared constantly through social media. She had like a photo essay book about spaces and places. And I think it's something that we have to be mindful of, because it is so important that we can try to be flexible. And I think it's so exciting to see some of the classrooms that, are really trying to make an attempt at having varied spaces. Like, for example, one classroom that I'm working in, they just received tables that are whiteboards. So instead of having it, and you have one of those, I think, in your room as well, right, Chad? So kids know that, I love how Catherine said this morning, writing is thinking, and it's that powerful thinking work that should happen at any point. And if you are thinking about the spaces like chairs, like there's standing desks in some classrooms. There are also those big balls that kids could sit on and, and feel comfortable or be up and moving, because it's not about sitting in your seat all day long. That's just, that's so ancient. And, and for kids, not only to have the ability to be moving around in the classroom, but to also have different tools in terms of their spaces and places.
Absolutely. And then like beginning to think about students' learning styles. One of the most powerful things I think I did for my students this year, once again, I whipped out sticky notes and anchor chart paper, and it was just, how do you learn best? And they had a conversation. They began at their tables, but talking about how they learn best, and they wrote it on sticky notes, and we stuck them up there, and then we just had a discussion. And all of a sudden, the conversation and the change in practice that came from it, where students all of a sudden realized my voice matters in this room, that when I talk, things happen, things change. And I'm fortunate to teach 8th grade. Well, by 8th grade, my students are super aware of how they learn best, and they're aware of when a teacher does not pay as much attention to how they learn best and then respond in kind to that. For instance, and it was something that was super simple, like Mr. Everett, when I'm writing, it really helps me if I put in my headphones. Not absolutely. So it's like, let's do that. How does that work for you? I'm like, I can't write with music, but I'm glad that you can, right? And sometimes not imposing our learning style or the way that we do things onto our students, but asking them, how do you learn best, and then being responsive to their needs.
Yeah. I actually was grabbing a book as you were talking, because it's shocking. I know that they're shocking,
Yes.
right? I don't know if you've seen this book by Stacey McCarthy. It's called Excellent Ed, and it's about a family that has a dog, and all of the members of the family talk about how excellent they are at certain things, and this dog feels like, I can never be excellent, and he's like kind of struggling with what is he going to be, what makes him special, excuse me. And again, a great conversation to have with our kids in looking through the lens of a picture book, and then talking about the things that make us special and what we're all growing towards to be excellent at something. Not the word excellent I don't love, but just thinking about something on a positive kind of growth mindset scale, like how we can grow and learn, and what are we doing to be the best that we can be. And I think that speaks to environment, as you said, and not imposing. For kids, too often they're restricted, and so when they have the opportunity to have flexible environments for learning, and also the opportunity to think about different tools for their learning, like you said, Post-its. We love to use Post-its, but there's some kids who maybe get a little Post-it crazy, so maybe use a Padlet instead, right? And then there are some people who say, oh, I'd rather have paper and pencil. But just being able to provide opportunities and tools that, speak to kids' strengths, and also what that will help them grow as well.
Right. And one of the things that I love to do at the beginning of the year is interest inventories. And then how can I help you as a reader? So 2 things. Pernille Rip, who we know and love and is brilliant, has her How Are You as a Reader inventory that she uses, or that she has as a resource. And also Jen Servallo in her wonderful reading strategies book has what can I work on as a reader survey. And those are just quick things that I can hand out to students really quick. And I use those as a jumping off point, especially at the beginning of the year for my reading conferences, because it talks about them as readers in years past, and also over the summer months, and also then beginning to learn about, so what do you want to read about? Because at the beginning of the year, this year, one of the things that I experienced with a lot of my students is they look at me like, Mr. Everett, I don't like to read. I think within the first 5 minutes of class on the first day of school, I had a student raise her hand, and what she needed me to know immediately is, Mr. Everett, I hate reading. I don't like books, and don't ever hand me a book and ask me to read. And so we've been in this back and forth of like where I'm just recommending books, and she's given them a try. And she, I think, was number 3 in the school for book checkouts, because she specializes in book abandonment at this point. And I brought her back because I had a book, because several conversations that we had, and conversations with the librarian, because we began to team together to try to find a good match for her. But last week, handed her a book. She's like, Mr. Everett, I don't like the cover of that book. And I'm like, I don't want to read that. I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, just give it 10 pages. And if you'll give it 10 pages and come back and talk to me. And I think one of the most powerful moments for me as a teacher was when she came back at the end of that week, and she's like, Mr. Everett, I'm on page 25. I've never read the page 25 in a book before in my life. I'm so serious. I love this book. And it's sometimes like just remembering as teachers, like that first book might not work, and that second book might not work, or the third, fourth, and fifth, whatever it takes. But that going back to what I say to students at the beginning of the year, I'll never quit on you. Even as it relates to your reading life, I will never quit on you. As many people I have to talk to, as many people as I have to bring into the loop to try to find a book that's going to be a good fit for you, I'm not quitting on you in your reading life.
So I'm such a geek. I'm so emotional. I feel like crying right now because that just makes me so happy, because when you think about building community, how lucky are your students that they have a teacher like you, and all the teachers that are like you who take that time to, focus on matching books to their readers and figuring out what's going to inspire them to want to keep reading, and giving them the choice and giving them the freedom to abandon a book. And I think, too often there are some classrooms where, students are told, well, they have to read this book. And so the importance of choice and voice in empowering our kids and building community. And when you say that, we've all had those aha moments, right? Where we get to say we've turned a reader onto a book, and it doesn't matter how many times it happens, it always gives me the chills, and it's one of the best parts of our jobs to be able to do that. So thank you for sharing that story.
I have tons of this school year because they started, and I can't tell them all. But anyway, so now thinking about also the number of ways that we can get kids hooked on books. Read aloud. We can't overstate the importance of read aloud. And without you and all those in my professional learning network that are always giving me book recommendations and thinking about the role of that in my life, could you just talk about read aloud and how you use read aloud and see it used in classrooms and how you've seen it be most effective?
Yeah, I actually think I had shared a slide with an acronym that we wrote about the power of read alouds. A colleague of mine, Erica Pecorelli, were presenting at Literacy for All, and so we had written a blog about this topic and importance about read alouds and the word because. And I can actually share the acronym, but I mean the image, excuse me. It's just hard to multitask and do that as we're talking. But basically, and Erica came up with the idea because standing for because every child's awareness and understanding is strengthened every time they're read to. And I think that is essential, because if you think about it, if we take the time, and we've said this before and we're kind of going back to this, if we take the time to read aloud to our kids and to read books because it's going to impact them. It's going to impact them in their knowledge, in their understanding, in their experiences, and then it's going to impact them in their hearts, in their feeling, whether they're actually living or breathing or knowing about that subject. But because of a read aloud that touches their hearts, it eventually will then impact their hands. And that's when we know it's essential. If you think about a read aloud and taking the time to, get kids turned on to reading, what is that doing? You just said this child was excited, had a feeling associated emotionally to that, and now will go out and her hands will seek another book by that author or seek another book, period. Or you read a book that has to do with like a book I love, I don't have it in my pile right here, but My Brother Charlie, which is actually about a boy who's autistic, and it's Holly Robinson Peete who wrote that book. And so whether you have a child in your class or in your school or in your family, if you know and are experiencing that through Charlie's experience, you have an understanding and a feeling and can hopefully build empathy for that. And then you will do something about that. Like, for example, in the book, My Brother Charlie, sad that I could tell you the whole words, but it says the last words are something like, my brother Charlie has autism, but autism doesn't have Charlie. And, just thinking about reaching out and being able to make a difference through a powerful read aloud like that, I think is essential. So I don't know if I answered your question, Chad, but hopefully did I?
Yes, absolutely. And I also think about sometimes using read aloud, going back to when the world hands you curriculum, right? When I can't find the words, or I'm not sure how to introduce a topic or to get into it, we're teachers of literacy. That books are who we are and what we do fundamentally, right? So this past week, with everything going on, I book talked Jason Rome's All-American Boys in my class. And so one of the things I did is I popped open my Audible app, and in addition to doing the book talk and reading a section out of it, I let them listen to part of the book. And one of the purposes also behind it was so that my students could understand that audiobooks are also real reading. Don't let anyone ever tell you that they're not, right? So as we had this conversation and just giving them a picture of my reading life, because it was, hey guys, sometimes I'm on the go and super busy, particularly during the summer when I'm on vacation and traveling back and forth, whatever it is. So I listen to audiobooks. I'm like, that is real reading. Don't let everyone tell you that it's not. And maybe also consider, hey, maybe that's a good way to get a kid hooked on reading. So one of the things it costs me this much a month, guys, I get this many credits. How easy is that? Maybe go home and talk to your parents about it. So when I finished, And all the kids were looking at me and Mr. Everett, that sounds like the news. And I'm like, it does, doesn't it? And then so it's the moment. So how many of you want to read this book? And hands went up. And well, there was only one problem at that point. We didn't exactly have enough copies in the library to accommodate all the students who wanted it. But what a great problem to have, right? Like that, where it's on where I put that on my to be read list, and then I can go back to it, and then I can let the student that read it turn around and get the next book talk. So those moments of also, when the world hands us a curriculum and we're unsure about how to move forward, also thinking about what role can text play then to jumpstart that conversation.
I love that you said that. I think that's so true. And I also think the power of connecting not only students with the books, but with the authors, that's a huge, huge opportunity as well. So, you know, after sharing a book like that, to tweet Jason Reynolds or Brendan Keeley and say to the kids, you know, do we have questions for them? Do you want to talk to them? And knowing that their stories are from these living, breathing, you know, authors, and that these people will be able to answer their questions. I think, again, that builds a community of readers and of learners that is so powerful. And that's something that we have the opportunity to do through social media. There's so many amazing connected authors who help us reach our kids in that way. And so another essential building community thing to do early on is to get on to Twitter, to look for authors to Skype with, to, you know, let our kids know who's out there, who is accessible, and who does stay connected. And, you know, we have that on the list as well.
Absolutely. And I was about to share another slide, but that made me think about one of my students this past week who I asked him if he wanted to do a book talk and to share it. And if he wanted me to tweet it out, and he looks at me, he's like, that's scary. I don't know about that. But then all of a sudden, I kept looking at him and talking to him. He was like, all right, I'll give it a try. And he records this book talk, and I tweet it out for him, and I tag the author of the book. And he ends up with like 500 and some odd likes and 84 retweets. And the next day in class, I walked up to him and I took my phone out and I was like, hey, check it out. And the look on his face, right? So yes, thank you to connected authors. And as classroom teachers, if you're not on Twitter, stop what you're doing now, listen to the archive later, go sign up right now. Like, it's just that important.
I love that you said that, because I was thinking as you were talking, I think kids often see the value of that a lot quicker. For those people who are still a little resistant to using Twitter in the classroom, you know, the kids are ready and jump right on, and they're all for it. And so I love that you just said that, because if you're not using Twitter to connect with authors, please, please, please go on and do that, because you will find that it's amazing. There's so many generous, talented individuals who will share. And not only that, it's also a way that we can get kids excited, like when book trailers come out, or the authors are showing, you know, a book birthday by a particular author, what is being celebrated. The kids get so excited. And, you know, it's just like when you go and you get to get an ARC for a kid, and you come back with an advanced reader's copy, and you put that in the hands of kids, and you say, who wants to be the first to read this book? It's like automatic. You know, it generates enthusiasm and excitement for that book because of that opportunity for kids as well.
All right, absolutely. And for sake of time, we're going to move. Next slide. So just one little word. JoEllen, tell us about this slide.
So many people may already know about this activity from Allie Edwards' work, where you think about one word, and it's kind of something she has started in lieu of resolutions. So around the time of January, people will focus on, you know, instead of a resolution, a one little word, and thinking about how that can focus you for the year, and how you're going to make that something that really will be what centers you. So, you know, if you go, you don't have to look at the slide, but you'll see words that were on there. I just did that activity with teachers recently, because this is the year. This is the beginning of the year, right? And we want kids to think, and teachers to think about, what is that word that's going to guide you throughout the year. And it's a great activity. As I said, I work often with teachers and students, but it's something that not only teachers can do, but the students can do. So, and we go back to those essential questions, asking kids to think about a word that will be the word that's going to inspire them, that they're going to keep as a center point. And for older kids specifically, it really works very well, because we can have those conversations with them. And as we've said in all of our conversations prior to this, you know, words have the power to extinguish or to ignite. And Jeff Anderson had actually said that to me in the last conversation we had. And I think it's so important that we take the time to think about those words. And Peter Johnston's work with choice words and opening minds, and, you know, thinking about those words that really, when we teach with intention and using words that make a difference, it's powerful.
Absolutely. And I see we're running a long time, so I'm going to move quickly through this slide. So these are two pictures from my classroom this year. And one of the things I want to think about with all the work that we do when we talk about community, it's a culture and community of we. And that means that as the classroom teacher, I'm also an active participant in that community. So on the right-hand side, everyone's in their writer's notebooks, and I'm right there alongside them, because I think if we're going to ask students to be vulnerable, we have to be vulnerable as well. So that means I have to take out my writer's notebooks and write alongside students, but also in front of students and sharing my words, because I think that reminds us sometimes of how personal writing is to all of us. Like, there's one thing that I always say, like with every stroke of the pen, the writer leaves a bit of him or herself right there between the lines on the page. And if I remember that about not only my writing, but student writing, then that vulnerability is such an important part of community where we really become close together. And then on the left-hand side, there's a picture of us where I took over the library one day because there was not enough space in my room with the tables. And we went in and tools of the trade, I pulled out my sentence strips that we also use to put our Minotaur sentences up on the wall. And we each wrote a line from our current independent reading books that spoke to us. Or a line that we thought was interesting. For my students that like nonfiction basketball books, this activity works. And for my students who love sci-fi, it works. Like, what's that one line? So for one student, it was this, I can't remember the athlete's name, but this basketball player comes from a single parent home, and so do I. And that really resonated with me, but he worked hard and he achieved his dreams, right? So we got together and then we created this found poem on the floor of the library together. And it's also interesting, like, as we think about the culture around reading, because sometimes those quotes open up conversations about the books that we're reading, because one student goes to another, like, oh, that's really interesting. What book are you reading, right? So it becomes another form and another way for us to make book recommendations for one another.
I love that you said that, you know, because the kids recommending books to one another is so important. It's not just us recommending books, it's kids being able to recommend books. And so when you start focusing on lines lines that kids love, it kind of piques the interest. And then going back as, you know, a coach and some of the work that we can do with teachers and our colleagues, even having faculty meetings or grade level meetings or morning meetings. I often do like a bagels and books in the morning with with teachers, excuse me. And sometimes at the end of the day, you know, say everybody come with like one new book that they have, because again, that's how we grow our ideas and our resources. And so it will then maybe inspire our colleagues to pick up a book to either share or to read or to recommend to their kids as well. So it's all about sharing. It's all about growing that conversation and being collaborative.
Absolutely. And in the spirit of sharing,
yay, we get to the sharing part.
and I actually tweeted out the link earlier because someone asked for it, but we get to our Padlet page. So if you have your phones, you can take it out and scan that QR code, and it will take you directly to the Padlet page. Or also, I'll tweet out the link again in just a second, or I'll retweet it in a second. But
I just tweeted it out as well.
Perfect. So everything that we talked about today is on the Padlet page, including a couple things that I talked about that came to mind that I'll go back and add to the Padlet page afterwards, so that y'all have access to it.
Yeah. So if anybody has any last minute questions, or maybe wants to share one thing that works really well for you in building community as you've started the year, as you continue to grow alongside your students, please tweet it out, share it with us, put the EdCollab Gathering space #6 and share your thoughts with us, because we would love to hear from you. You could certainly go into that Padlet and add on there either book titles, or maybe there are other inspirational videos. I know Chad and I worked on putting many of those resources together for you so that you have the opportunity to continue this conversation. But we want to learn from you as well. So please add, share your thinking, and let us know.
Yes. One quick thing I see. That Lauren is back, so I know we got to go. And then one quick question over on the side that I'll answer. So what advice do you have for when lower readers don't want to read in class because their books are easy books? So one question would be, it depends on the grade level that I'm talking about, but I would go right back to the things that we talked about all year long, is what reason does that child have to be invested in that book? So what choice did they have in selecting that book? So just because that student may be a dormant reader or reading below grade level, that doesn't mean that they should have a book that interests and engages them. So I would think maybe do a book tasting with just a couple of students that are at that same place where they feel like they had some choice in selecting that book, where engagement is high. So the focus is not on that I have an easy book, but on a book that I pick that I can talk to my friends about. So sometimes I think the problem is that when we select the books, yes, they just see it as, well, here's a book that's within your lexile, but we're not considering all those other data points that inform how that student is going to be able to deal with that book as it relates to comprehension.
Yep, absolutely. And I think just to give a shout out to the work of Professor Nana, on Twitter, Terry Lassane, she talks about reading ladders. And I think that that's something that I often recommend too, if we're trying to find books to match students with maybe if a kid is uncomfortable about a certain book, talking about reading ladders and also looking at text is not just books, but also videos and images as well. So hopefully that's helpful advice. But
Absolutely.
I'm excited that I got to share with you, Chad, and to learn with you and to continue to learn with you. So thank you for sharing your classroom with us as well.
Thank you, JoEllen. You're awesome. I would not be the professional that I am without you. And I know we're out of time. So really quick, keep the conversation going. So don't forget, you can tweet us at the Ed Collab. And if you want to tweet about just today's session, at the Ed Collab space #6, or you can tweet directly to us. My Twitter handle is at Chad C. Everett, and JoEllen can be found at JoEllen McCarthy.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And don't be shy to tweet, guys, because these two will definitely respond to your tweets. They're really great. I just want to say it was a pleasure monitoring the Twitter feed while you were talking. It's like the Geeks Unite right now. Like everybody's so excited about books and everything that you talked about. So thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise. I would like to bring up the upcoming sessions so you can stick around with us. By the way, if you missed any portion of today, all sessions are archived on the Ed Collab Gathering website so that you can view at your leisure. Up in session 3, we have workshop number 10. Sarah, Barbara, Howard, Katie, Rochelle, and Tammy are going to be talking about connecting the dots, the power of a global PLN. In workshop number 11, Pernell and Amira are going to talk about global read aloud. In workshop number 12, Dana, Beth, and Deb are going to talk about going public with kids writing, rethinking audience purpose and feedback. And in workshop number 13, Laquita and Danielle are going to talk about women and leadership. And in workshop number 14, Jillian, Kale, and Angie will talk about picture books at every grade, the power of shared stories. And please don't forget about the court-appointed Special Advocates for Children. That's our charity of the day. Please, please, please donate. It's an excellent organization. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you at the next session.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks.